The left's open declaration of war on free speech. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Y'all know yesterday I just did a video on Hillary Clinton and how she's talking about censorship and getting rid of free speech. The left cannot win in a war of debates, or in a war of words, I should say, in a war of truth. They will lose because all they have is lies, and they don't want it. They don't want you to be able to call them out on their lies, on their propaganda. So to do that, to squash dissent, they have to get rid of free speech. They have to censor, and that's their only way, because they are losing this war. I mean, just look at everything that's going on, especially when you look at the left. They're hemorrhaging the black vote now because people are waking up. People have alternative sources for information. They have to no longer follow MSNBC in their lives. They no longer have to follow the mainstream media and their propaganda, because there's alternative ways of getting information, i.e., social media. So they have to censor so they can get control of the narrative. Hillary Clinton even said so herself. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to talk about how they openly are trying to throw out the Constitution, throw out your First Amendment. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button, share this out so we can get this information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. It has a link to my Patreon. That's where I talk about things that I can't talk about here. There's also a link to my Instagram and my X account. So follow me there as well. All right, so let's talk about this news. Now, this comes from the Liberty Daily by Mike Gonzalez by way of the Daily Signal. And he reports that leftists are becoming increasingly totalitarian in their antipathy for freedom of speech. It's an obstacle to their desire for power, so it must be crushed. An exaggeration, you say? Just listen to what high-profile leftists have been openly saying about denying you your right to information on both sides of the political equation. Former presidential candidate and Obama Secretary of State John Kerry has gotten the most attention recently, mainly because of how bluntly he railed against our most fundamental freedom. But former Clinton Secretary of Labor Robert Rich has been just as repressive and more detailed, and Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been her usual self as she demands censorship without much specificity. Kerry made his comments at a World Economic Forum panel on green energy on September 25th. A conservative comedian trying to satirize the views of the haughty ruling class could not have come up with better material. As Kerry put it, quote, "The dislike of anger over social media is just growing and growing and growing, and it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around an issue." Kerry lamented, apparently referring to the abhorrence of freedom by members of his ilk. Goes on to say, "It's really hard to govern today. The problem," he said, "was that the internet and social media have liberated people to choose from different sources of information, adding competition. Little over 2 decades ago, the country was held hostage to views of the journalists working at the 3 networks and a handful of national newspapers." Kerry pines for those days. Quote, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact have been eviscerated to a certain degree, and people self-select where they go for their news or for their information, and you get into a vicious cycle, said the man who came within 19 electoral college votes of becoming president in 2004. Thank God it didn't happen. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 40 to 50 years I've been involved in this. So he's upset that he can no longer control the narrative. He continued, "There's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities if people go to only one source, and the source they go to is sick and has an agenda and it's putting out disinformation. Our First Amendment standards as a major block to the ability to hammer it out of existence." So Y'all know I say time and time again, we have a right to be disinformed. It's up to the person to do their own due diligence to search out the truth, to search out information. It's not up to the government to tell us what is disinformation, what is truth, and what is not. Kerry's solution, he says, what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change. Democracies are very challenged right now and have not proven that they can move fast enough or big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And to me, this is part of what this race, this election is all about. Will we break the fever in the United States? So he straight up says that this election is about freedom of speech, which we know is Trump, or censorship, which we know is Kamala Harris. Rich also discussed his desire to hammer pernistic sources, I cannot say that word, of information out of existence with the global audience. Writing in the leading newspaper of the British left, The Guardian, he engaged in a bit of disinformation himself by mischaracterizing the actions of the man he hammered out, ex-owner Elon Musk. Musk and former President Donald Trump, quote, have both floated the idea of governing together if Trump wins the second term, wrote Rich. Whereas, in fact, as Rich admitted himself, all Musk has done is recommended that Trump have a second term, quote, government efficiency commission, which I definitely agree to, in which Musk, quote, would be happy to help out, but apparently unaware that he was committing the same crime he accused Musk to be guilty of. Rich went on with the recommendation for how officials around the world should, quote, rein in Musk. I mean, this is disgusting behavior. The first one was for people to boycott Musk's electric vehicle, Tesla, and his social media company, X, but Rich wants much more. Quote, regulators around the world should threaten Musk with arrest if he doesn't stop disseminating lies and hate on X, he wrote. As for the U.S. government, it, quote, should terminate its contracts with him, starting with Musk SpaceX, wrote Rich, who published his screed weeks before the U.S. government had to come to SpaceX, hat in hand, asking to retrieve 2 astronauts stranded by NASA. You don't understand. We really don't have a program that sends people into space right now. We need SpaceX. So this is what happened with these idiots that so-called that believe they can tell Americans what to do. They think we dumb. But Ocasio-Cortez has been far less trenchant and specific. The young representative, who's been repeatedly dinged by left-leaning PolitiFact for spreading falsehoods, also wants to rein in media she considers guilty of spreading misinformation. Quote, we're going to have to figure out how to rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation she posted on social media. Again, one of the most heavily purveyors of misinformation, talking about getting rid of misinformation. They're hypocrites. She goes on to say, it's one thing to have different opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false. So that is something that we're looking into. Again, the First Amendment protects your speech even if it's not true. Unfortunately, these unhinged comments by American politicians don't come in a vacuum. There is a sustained attack on freedom and freedom of information from Brazil to our ally, the United Kingdom, to next door Canada. Of course, that makes it all the more important that we speak up for freedom. We have to speak up against this because our government is so tyrannical. They're so anti-constitution that they will do everything they can to try to take away your rights. And they do this in the name of freedom, in the name of democracy. They say they need to take away your democracy. This is disgusting. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this. Leave your comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe. And check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time, peace.